BioWare is working overtime to deliver Dragon Age Dreadwolf in the next Mass Effect. The next Mass Effect game is a continuation of the original trilogy and has stirred up interest among its fans. But with Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda as their greatest achievements in the last 9 years, how hopeful should we actually be for Mass Effect 4? With Mass Effect 4 being announced back in 2020, we still haven't really seen any gameplay from it. This is not so weird, considering game development time has increased over the years. And maybe the largest question we should answer ourselves is what makes Mass Effect 4 different from Andromeda? For starters, the game is developed in Unreal Engine 5, which put this game back to its roots among its trilogy friends. This is huge, considering that game engines often can tell us about certain limitations and features the game will have. Personally, I don't really understand why Mass Effect Andromeda switched to the Frostbite engine, considering how inexperienced the crew was with that software. And that is not to completely bash Andromeda. There were definitely elements of that game that were better than the original trilogy, like the combat. But don't get me started about the tired faces. But that quickly ran me into my concerns about the game. As far as I know, none of the original writers of the original trilogy is coming back to write this game. And the story and understanding of the world building was a big part of Mass Effect's success. Furthermore, I'm skeptical that BioWare actually understood what made the original trilogy so good. Maybe my biggest fear is that they will use Andromeda as their primary reference in creating the next Mass Effect, which I think will affect the end product negatively. And that is not to say that I don't want there to be technological improvements to the game, but I don't want BioWare to be too focused on delivering lifelike empty planets and a beautiful but shallow experience. The whole thing that made the original trilogy great was the stories, the companions, the lore, and the great dialogues. And while some people have been crying over the internet over the rumor of Mass Effect 4 not being open world, I would like to say kudos to BioWare for actually making that decision. It was originally something I was terrified of, not because it wouldn't have been cool, but because I think that the focus should be on what made the original trilogy great. And let's be honest, the reality is that we have to keep in mind that game development is demanding and time-consuming, and I would not have been shocked if an open world would take away precious time in crafting these great stories and companions. The Mass Effect trilogy is something that I didn't even start to play before the start of this year, and my reasoning was foolishly that I thought the game looked dated and linear. And ironically, that dumb logic led me straight to Mass Effect 1, when I felt burned out of all these open-world games with empty worlds, boring fetch quests, and uninspiring characters. And how funny it was that Mass Effect Andromeda, which I thought was right up my alley, was exactly the type of game I was tired of the gaming industry pushing out. A game is so much more than pretty graphics and huge amounts of activities, because those things really don't matter if the universe and characters around you are shallower than a bowl of cereal. And I actually believe that the average consumer wants these huge redundant games because they think it is enough to satisfy their needs for hundreds of hours. But in reality, they underestimate how important the fundamentals of the world building and story are. Trust me, most of us have, and I am personally a victim of this mindset. And so while I'm hopeful for Mass Effect 4, at the same time, I think everybody should reserve some excitement for when BioWare has more to show.